cooking demonstration will focus on curry roasted vegetables and chicken. On behalf of our sponsors, the Awala Leaf Cafe at Windward Community College, Noah Senior Services on Maui, and AARP Hawaii, I'd like to welcome you here this evening. In case you don't know AARP Hawaii, we're a member organization for people 50 and older, but what we do for everybody. We hope that with this series, you can learn some techniques that you can use to build or maintain your healthy lifestyle. Okay, let's do a quick bit of housekeeping, technical housekeeping. This is a picture of what you should be seeing at the bottom of your screen on Zoom. By this time in the pandemic, I think you've seen it once or twice. If you were using an iPad, you'll probably see it on the top. At this point, everybody is on mute. If you want to submit a question for the chef, please click the button that says Q&A and type in your question there. We'll be monitoring the questions and making sure they get to the chef. If you're watching on Facebook Live, you may want to type your questions in the comments section there. We won't be using the raised hand command because questions will be submitted via the Q&A. The chat command also isn't necessarily going to be used unless you want to communicate a technical issue to the staff. We have Alice Swift and Dave DeWitt here managing that chat. We're giving away 3 prizes of custom spices from the Awala Leaf Cafe via random drawing. And if you're chosen, we'll confirm the notification from Dave via the private chat. So be watching your chat area. You'll need to confirm your name and email address so that we can contact you about where to send your prize. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce Chef Daniel Swift, who will be leading us through this cooking series. I'm going to turn it over to Chef Dan.
I got it.
Jim, you need to turn your camera off.
Okay. That work? Okay. Can you hear me? I need to upgrade my prescription.
You sound great.
Looking for the unmute button. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you again for joining us. We appreciate everyone. It's part of AARP, and Jim, thanks for that intro. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day to learn a little trick or tip or two about cooking. And tonight we're focusing on vegetables. Summer's coming on. A lot of people are gardening now. So the herbs and the vegetables that you'll be able to get at the supermarket and or from friends or from your own garden should be plentiful for the next few months. So what I wanted to do tonight is highlight a dish that I make a lot. Actually, we've done this quite a bit here. I've actually delivered it quite a few times through webinars, and I have a deja vu thing. Hopefully this isn't repetition, but it's super simple and it's very quick. It can be done with even frozen vegetables, and there's only a few elements and components that go into it, and it's very flavorful. It could be served with any protein or whatnot. So here I've just listed a couple of the things that you need, the elements or components of the dish. One is, of course, your fresh vegetables. Up to you what you like. The ones I have here tonight are the ones that are listed on the recipe, but I also saw a couple at the supermarket when I was shopping yesterday, like corn. I thought I would add that to the dish as well. So whatever you want to add in there is up to you. If there's an item here you don't like and you'd like to substitute it with something else, feel free to do that. You could honestly do this with 2 or 3 vegetables, no problem. I always recommend that you do a little bit of a spice blend on the vegetables themselves before you roast them. Tonight we're using the vegetable curry. This is Lauren Tamamoto's creation with her students at Culinary Innovation Center over at Kapiolani. She has a series of those spices. This particular one is designed to go with vegetables, so it worked really well for what we're doing tonight. But that gives it a little extra layer of flavors when we go to the cooking process and we try to season it up, almost like a rub or a marinade. The other component, or the next one, a little bit of fat, and it's up to you. Tonight I have avocado oil spray. I also have olive oil. If you're watching your fat and you just want to eliminate that, you can do that. But you just have to bear in mind you're not going to get necessarily the caramelization. So you don't need a lot, but you like to have a little bit in there so that the spices will stick, and like I said, you'll get that caramelization. And then I also put here a little bit of water. So especially with things like broccoli, denser vegetables like cauliflower, that little bit of water tossed with it will absorb into the pockets in the vegetable. And then when it roasts in the oven, it almost sort of steams it initially, and then the water evaporates, and then you get the roasting to take place. So it kind of eliminates a step of blanching, because sometimes people will blanch in hot water their vegetables before they'll roast them. A protein, that's optional. Tonight I have a few that I'll talk about. The one we'll demonstrate, I'm going to actually put all three of them in. And then the one that we'll plate at the end only has the chicken in it. And then fresh herbs are always great. Tonight I just pulled some green onions. I'm going to cut those julienne, put them on at the end. But any herb that you like that's on the fresher side, if you joined us for our herb class not long ago, cooking with fresh herbs, maybe 2 months ago, there were like two primary categories: your sort of fresh salad-like herbs, cilantro, parsley, basil, and then the earthy herbs, rosemary, thyme, sage, things like that. Either one would work well for what we're doing here. Totally up to you. And then I just put a side dish as well. If you're interested in, serving it with a salad, serving it with, tonight we have a cauliflower gnocchi, so you could serve it with pasta. This would be great in a cold pasta salad. There's just, of course, side of rice or brown rice or whatever you'd like works as well. But up to you completely to determine what the finished dish looks like. What we're focusing on tonight is just sort of the cuts that we'll want to do for the vegetables, the proper seasoning, oven temperature, roasting, and things like that. So, all right, that being said, really quick, let me show you the proteins that we have. We got some chicken, some low-fat chicken sausage in today. So I thought I just said, hey, that's perfect. I grabbed a couple of those and sliced them up, cut them on a bias. So they'll be a little bit larger. I didn't want to cut them straight so they look like little hot dog pieces. I wanted them on a bias. So they take up a little bit more space. They can absorb a little bit more of the seasoning that we're going to put on there, the curry. I've got a little bit of tofu. I've put it on paper towels to absorb as much of the moisture as possible. And then some chicken breast that I just cut into about 1-inch pieces. Up to you if you wanted to use thigh, you could do that as well. Leg, any meat would work. You could probably do this same dish with pork also. So get creative and take a look at what you have in the fridge and try to utilize that. We're really kind of big on being fast and healthy and and utilizing the stuff that we already have in the house, which can be helpful. So those three items I'm going to actually use in the dish. So I'm going to start by adding those to the bowl. The tofu, if you're using tofu, I recommend always going with the firm tofu and making sure that when you open it, you drain all the water. Oops, and then I pour it out on the table because there's a lot of water packed in there and we want our tofu to be dry. So once you absorb all the water, then you can just cut your squares. And I'm going to make these a little bit larger, actually about the same size as the chicken, 1-inch cubes. And then I'll add those as well. You do have to be a little bit careful because they're more fragile than chicken or sausage or some of the other items. The next thing that I have here is this is the curry spice that I got from this packet here. You can buy your own blends or honestly use any spice that you want. I'm going to dump this in. This one is great because it has some dehydrated onions in it as well, which I just love. They work great for that. I've got some sriracha. You can use your favorite hot sauce. Anyone works. I just like a little bit of heat And the cooking process actually diminishes the heat a little bit. So don't be worried too much about adding or about the final dish being too hot, because you, like I said, lose a little bit of that heat in the cooking process. And then here's the water that I have. And this is about 2.5 tablespoons. This recipe is a little bit larger than the one that I sent out via email because we want to do a larger plate. But the water is just enough to kind of coat the vegetables and give it that initial steam that we talked about. And then fresh garlic. Now I could take this garlic and put it in whole if I was a huge garlic lover, but this dish cooks pretty quickly. So I don't want the garlic to be raw when I eat it. So a small piece like this would be no problem. This would probably be okay. I don't know if you can see that, but these are, smaller cloves, maybe about the size of a pea. And the larger ones, you definitely want to either slice or crush. And in this case, I'm just going to crush them. So I'm taking my knife, or you can use a mallet or the back of a pan or anything flat, lay it on top, just give it a little tap, kind of crushes it, and the heat will penetrate and cook it more quickly than it would if it was whole. Just a couple of those. Oops. They will shoot across the room once in a while. Be careful. And this is when it starts to smell really, really good. You get the aromas coming off the garlic. So that goes in. And then let's look at the vegetables that I have here. I cut most of them already, but I'll show you a couple little tricks, or at least the approach that I use when cutting some of these vegetables. An onion's pretty straightforward. So that I just cut into large dice because I want all of my pieces in this dish to be about the same size. So that's about a half of a large onion. I've got some zucchini and some yellow squash, or crookneck squash, sometimes they call it. I've cut these because they're tender into slightly larger pieces. So if your vegetable is softer and more tender, you want your piece to be a little bit larger. If it's like a carrot where it's much firmer, then you want the piece to be a little bit smaller. That's really the trick here, is to make sure that all of them are cooked to perfection at the same time. So these are a little bit larger, about 1.5 inches square. And then what I did was I just quartered them, lined them up, and then cut my squares at about 1.5 inches. Now, obviously, the zucchini or the crookneck squash can taper a little bit, so you just do your best, and you don't have to worry about it if they're not all exactly the same. The peppers diced, that's pretty easy, simple, and straightforward. That gives great color as well. The carrots, very simple. I did that smaller, as I mentioned, so that they cook at the same time. Here's the corn that I picked up, and I just cut it straight down. I left the cob on and everything. Now you could shave it off if you wanted to and throw it in, but I'm going to leave it. I like to be able to pick up the pieces at the end and eat them that way. So those go in. I've got some sliced mushrooms that I just cut in half. These are creminis, and because they're small, I just simply washed them, dried them, and cut them in half. You could quarter them. I wouldn't slice them though, because then you end up, it's too limp. You want to have some texture there when you're done at the very end. So those cut like that works great. Here's the cauliflower, which works great. These pieces are about the same size, about 1 inch square. And I also used part of the stems. I like the flavor of these stems. If you peel off the outer edge, just like with the broccoli, you can utilize that as well. So that becomes important. And then the last one is the broccoli right here. And I wanted to talk about using the stem for the broccoli. So if you cut the end off and peel a little bit of the fiber on the outside, honestly, you don't always even have to do that if you like the texture. This is perfectly good to use. A lot of people throw it away, but it's great. So I kept this. I'm going to split it in half. And then I'm just going to cut smaller pieces. Because it's fibrous and a little firmer than the florets of broccoli, I go a little bit smaller, about 1/2 inch. So this is a larger bowl of vegetables and product than you'd have in the recipe. This will serve about 8 people. And now I just need to get it nice and coated the way we talked about, to make sure that we get all that seasoning, the sriracha, the water embedded in there, a little bit of the oil that I need to add. And I'd be happy to take any questions if you have any there, Jim. I'm going to actually add a little bit more of the spice.
And we have 2 curry-related questions.
Yes.
One is, where is the curry mix available for purchase? Where can we get that?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is one of the ones that's in the package that is given out to the lucky winners for the drawing every week. So I know 3 of those go out, but currently it's not available for sale because our campus is closed. But hopefully, if you're, watch the news and looking at the guidelines that are now starting to be relaxed a little bit, well, let's cross our fingers and hope that come fall, folks will be able to return to campus, and you can pick these up here at the Wall Leaf Cafe. You may be able to pick them up at Kapiolani. I'm not sure exactly what their schedule's like, but it is a product that is made by the students and the instructor, Lauren Tamamoto, over at Kapiolani. So great question.
Right. One other quick curry question. Carla asks, I bought a Thai-style green curry paste, but it's too hot for me. Is there any way to lose some of the heat?
That's a great question, Carl. I've had that same problem before myself. If you're doing soups, like coconut milk will help reduce it. Obviously, it's not necessarily ultra healthy. But in terms of the spice itself, other than diluting it, there's not much you can do. You probably got that canister of the paste. The chilies are in there, the heat's in there. It's just using less in a soup or a stew type of dish that will dilute the heat. But they do make some Thai style pastes that are less hot. So do check the label and see if you can get the one that has like 1 chili peppers as opposed to 3 or 4. And that will help you. But yeah, I've had that problem before as well.
Would you like another question?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Valerie asks, what about using ka'achoa? Am I pronouncing that correctly? Ka'achoa?
Oh, kabocha. Yeah, actually, I saw something in the store today. And I'm like, oh, but you can see how my bowl would have been this full if I'd gotten all of the things that I wanted to get. I was looking at the sweet potatoes even. Jackie Bowen and I were talking today about Uwala sweet potatoes, or even regular yams or sweet potatoes. Anything in here would work. Now, just keep in mind that if you're doing a yam or a kabocha, you got to make sure that you're cutting it to the size so that everything gets done at the same time. That's the real trick here. And here I'm just adding a little bit more water because this is a larger batch than I thought. But yeah, absolutely. You can use any of those vegetables. You can even throw in some small russet potatoes or, those little fingerlings like we did, I think a couple classes ago. This would be a good crepe filling if everything was cut smaller, if you joined us for crepes last week. And then I just put a little bit of salt in here as well. This is just our salt mix that we do. You can see how colorful it becomes. So this, because it has the protein in it already, can be a dish in and of itself. It doesn't really have to be served with anything else other than maybe that side if you want the carbohydrates. But the carbs could also be inside and cooking with this particular dish. So you can see that everything held up well. The chicken separates, the sausage separates. They all get a little bit of a shine, which might be difficult for you to see that. But that moisture and that water has been absorbed into the vegetables and coated the items. The tofu held up pretty well right there. The corn and everything's got the seasoning on it, and it looks really nice. So then the next trick is to to choose your baking sheet. This could be done in a glass Pyrex dish. It could be done on a flat sheet pan like I have here. It could be done in a convection oven or a conventional oven, either one. But what I find is if you go with a shallower pan, like a baking sheet, you get more heat interacting with the items that are along the outer edge. If it's in a Pyrex or a glass pan or a Pyrex pan, or if it's in a metal pan that has higher edges, the heat doesn't really get to the items that are close to it as well. Especially if you have a circulating oven or a convection oven with a fan, that will move that heat around really well and brown everything nice and evenly. So I recommend a flat pan, and I recommend that you line it, either foil or in this case, just a sheet of parchment paper. It just makes cleanup so much easier. So one last little toss. And if I have time, I mean, we try to do this in about 30 minutes. If I have time, I will often let this sit. So the items that I'll share with you that were cooked already, I let sit for about an hour and a half. Not absolutely necessary, but it allows that spice that you use, the seasoning that you use to absorb into the vegetable and into the proteins that you might have put in there. Also, the salt can draw out a little of the moisture that is in some of those vegetables, like mushrooms, for example. So that can help increase the flavor a little bit on the back end as well, but it's not necessary. It's just a technique. So the next trick, as we load this pan, I'm going to start with about half of it. I don't want to do it all because what I don't want is a mountain of vegetables and chicken or whatever you're using, and then not having the heat penetrate it. So one of the keys to this is to make sure that it's all spread out evenly and it's a single layer of product. So you try to think of each of these pieces of vegetable and protein as an independent unit, and you want each of them to be surrounded with heat as much as possible. So it's not going to ever be perfect where they're all the same, but you want to spread it out and not overcrowd the pan. If you prepare more vegetable than will fit on that pan, just get a second pan and do two pans together. It will work much better than mounding it up, because this pan is too small for all of the product that I have here. It'll take most of it, but not quite all of it. I'm going to go about like that. So nice, even layer. And this one I'll just put in a oven in the back later on and roast that separately. So once you have it all spread out, you can see the chicken is separated. You want to make sure that it's even, and then I'll always come back and hit it with a little bit more seasoning just on top. You don't necessarily need to do the salt. Fresh cracked pepper would be really nice here, but we've got this beautiful curry, so just a light dusting on top. I love the smell of this. This is a great blend. So we'll look forward to that coming out more later. All right, so that's basically it. And on the recipe, it goes into the oven at 400 degrees, which is what I put on there, but you have a range there depending on the level of caramelization that you're looking for. So depending on what I'm doing with the dish, I may go upwards of about 485 degrees, and that's with a fan in the oven. And that's what I did here. If we look, it's a smaller pan, but it's the same blend of vegetables. And I like to get a little bit of that caramelization. The searing of that fat and those spices on the outside of the vegetables works great. And I checked the flavors when it came out of the oven. I had to be careful because at 485 degrees, the difference of a minute or two can really determine whether you're successful or not with a dish. You do not want to burn it. So if you're a little cautious or if you're busy doing other things, this roasted for about 8.5 minutes. So if you're doing other things at home, then maybe you're better off at about that 400-degree temperature. It's still not going to take much more than about 12 to 15 minutes, and then let it rest a little bit, but it will cook really quickly and you don't want to burn it.
Chef Dan, a question.
Yeah.
Might pertain to this. You line the pan with parchment paper or foil, does it matter which?
It's up to you. We use parchment paper because it's less expensive. It's better for the environment. If you have a non-stick pan at home, you probably wouldn't need either, but we don't use those. If you have the silicone mats, they make the silicone mats. It's really to help you in the cleanup at the end. I didn't bring out the paper that this was roasted on, but it saved me a lot of time in the dish station scrubbing the pot.
Natalie asks, is there a curry substitute? She loves curry, but her husband does not.
Oh, he does not. Yeah, in that case, what I would do is probably just something neutral on your vegetables and protein when you're seasoning it, and then use the curry on your plate when you dish it up. So it comes out of the oven, no curry, just salt, pepper, maybe whatever fresh herb you might like, or spice. And then when it comes out, you can put the seasoning on top, just like I did here at the end. So that way you both end up with the dish that you like.
And one more. Laverne asked, have you ever used breadfruit in this recipe?
I have breadfruit. I have not. I just did some breadfruit though. It would be ideal. As a matter of fact, I think in my meeting with Jackie today, we're going to be focusing on some breadfruit in the fall, a series of classes built around that. So we're excited to be able to do that, but it would work ideal. Anything in here that you like will work perfectly. So feel free to get creative. One other thing that we had that I saw today that came in, I've never seen it before. It's gnocchi, but this is a cauliflower gnocchi. So it's like 40% cauliflower. So if you're in the cauliflower business, you're probably doing pretty well these days. You've got the cauliflower crusts. It's been developed to take to be a substitute for a lot of things that have gluten in them. So you'll see recipes for cauliflower fried rice, pizza crusts and things like that. I've never seen the gnocchi. I thought it was interesting. I boiled one thinking it was like pasta and it kind of disintegrated. And then I read the label and I cooked it for 2 minutes. I'm one of those guys, right? So I don't read the label. I go off of what I think I know, and then I realize I was wrong. But this was really actually very flavorful. It was Green Giant, which is surprising, but it was made in Italy. So go figure. Here we are. So I'm going to add that in here just to give us that side. I could easily serve it on the side as well, like with rice or quinoa or something like that. But I figured I would toss it in here with a little touch of oil. I think I've got enough seasoning in there already. And I want to be gentle because I don't want it to fall apart. Actually going to toss it. It's easier for me. And then we can just dish it up. It makes it super simple. It's so fragrant. That's another thing I love about this dish. Regardless of whether you put protein in it or not, you get this beautiful caramelized vegetable. All the different ones have their own fragrance and it just all comes through. It reminds me of like barbecues in a way, right? When you're throwing different skewers of meat and vegetables on the grill, you get that aroma. It's delicious. And then I just have some green onions. And you could use, I should have grabbed some basil. I was kicking myself, some basil or some Italian parsley or whatever your favorite fresh herb is. But we had these ones handy. We're a little limited right now on what's growing. And then I'm going to line them up and just cut them on kind of a fine bias. And that means just cutting it at an angle, almost in line with the green onion itself. And I may not need all of these. I'll just do a fair amount so that I can get enough. And for someone who doesn't like green onions, obviously you don't necessarily have to put them in there. There's a lot that are really strong, others are more mild. So make sure you taste one before you put it on your final dish and serve it, because you want to make sure that it's not like super strong and overpowering the fresh vegetables that you have there.
And Myra asks, would sprinkling a bit of sugar on the veggies help with the caramelization?
Absolutely, Myra. That's a great question. And that's exactly what one of the goals of this series is, aside from teaching some healthy dishes that can be prepared quickly at home. We want to make sure that people start to understand the principles of cooking, and that caramelization is exactly right. So a little bit of sugar in there would indeed help it caramelize. And you'll notice as you do this at home that vegetables that have a little bit more sugar will tend to caramelize a little bit more on the outside. So if you have a vegetable that doesn't have much sugar, a little pinch of sugar couldn't hurt for sure.
I also asked, how about mirin, which is a Japanese sweet wine?
Yeah, what I would say, mirin, certainly any of those would work. And what you may also try to do, if you look back to like what we've done with some of the marinades, we did a class on marinades, and we did, I think we did a Japanese dish or some dishes that were similar. Marinating your chicken or your protein, if you have one in this particular dish, would work well, or substitute that water that we have in the recipe with mirin, sake, Scotch whiskey, whatever, maybe not Scotch whiskey. It might overpower the vegetables, but your mild items like that would work perfectly. A little bit of Chardonnay would be great. This would be a really nice dish, hot or cold, and or served with meat or without. And even a little glass of white wine would be perfect with this.
Well, speaking of that, Corky's mom asked, what are the suggested side dishes and beverages to go with this?
Yeah, for sides, but our focus is fast, healthy, and Ono. So I will always sort of default to, when you're cooking rice, which a lot of people do and they eat it every day. We do a hopper rice here. It's 50-50, brown and white. We try to get the whole grains in there if we can. So brown rice would be great. Quinoa would be great. Lentils, really any grain would be great on the side with this. Some of those can actually even be tossed inside, just like we did here with gnocchi. So you can imagine penne tossed in here, your favorite pasta. Maybe not spaghetti, might not work as well, but any of the larger bite-sized pieces of pasta would work in there as well. In terms of beverage, the sky's the limit, but what we have here is something that's kind of on the earthy side. So depending on your herb that you use or how you finish it, if you're outdoors in the summer and it's a nice light day, a lemonade would be great. A little lemon zest on top of this with a lemonade would be good. So if you think about the things that you're serving for the beverage, you usually, or what I'll always say is you either try to compare them, get them to match up, or you try to get some contrast. So that leaves it pretty broad for you, but almost any beverage would work well for this. The key is to kind of line up your spices and line up your herbs and your finishing garnishes. Because I actually have like here some balsamic syrup. We made this a couple classes ago, and you can buy it already made. Here's a great the olive oil company, a Black Mission Fig balsamic vinegar. Janice gave us this, and we use it in certain dishes. A little drizzle of that at the end would be good. A little drizzle of the syrup on top would add that tart sweetness at the end as well. So anything like that would be great. It's just up to you to sort of decide how you want to finish it. I would also say that to finish this at the end, I probably should have kept some peppers, some fresh red peppers, or even some diced or some tomato wedges around the outside would be really good. But that's the dish, and it smells great. It would be, a piece of fish would be good with this, pork, you name it.
Florence asked if you could use seafood in the recipe, and if so, which one's the best?
Oh, that's a tough question. You absolutely could use seafood. The trick with seafood is just to keep in mind that it cooks quickly. There's not a lot of connective tissue, so you don't have to break it down. And if you overcook it, it becomes dry, just like chicken breast. So you would have to make sure that you're cooking it at that temperature, probably a little over 400. And I would even make the pieces of fish a little bit larger than your pieces of vegetable, so that you are certain that that's the item you're watching as you're roasting this. So that when the fish is done to perfection the way you want it, then the vegetables, they have a lot more leeway. You know, you can eat any of these vegetables raw. So, you know, you're already good to go from the beginning, but you don't want to overcook your fish or your shrimp or your crab. This would be good with lobster. You know, you could pretty much use anything you want, but your protein in that case is the driver to make sure that's what you're watching when you're determining the doneness. The veggies, you know, they're good to go at any time, but the protein or the fish especially, you don't want it dry. So in terms of the type of fish, gosh, any of them would work. Not small whole fish, but you could certainly, you know, whether you're using tuna or salmon or shitomi or you name it, marlin, any of those cubed would work great. Really good question.
Question, it might be something you'll be addressing in the coming weeks, but what would be a nice healthy dessert to go with this dish?
Oh, I don't know anything about healthy desserts. I know we have molten chocolate cake coming up here at some point in the next few weeks. Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, what I would say maybe to think about in terms of when you start to plan a meal, right? If you're thinking beverage, you're thinking entree, sides, dessert. If you're trying to create some continuity throughout the meal and have those items complement themselves, think thematic, right? So this is summer. So when these vegetables are in season, well, it's, you know, these days you can buy most stuff year round. What are the fruits that are going to be in season at that time? So if it's a mango, right, in the summer, mango, anything would be good. Sliced fresh mango would be good. A little bit of angel food cake with some fresh mango and some yogurt. If you want it to be fast, right, you can just get one of those pre-made rings of angel food cake, slice that with some fresh mango and a container of yogurt that you stir up and serve that on the side. So fruit would be good. Because we're talking fast, you probably don't want to take the time to make pie crust and make pies. But I mean, honestly, the sky is the limit when it comes to desserts to go with things like this. If you're doing curry, one item in the curry realm that we didn't use tonight is coconut. So a hapia or a version of hapia would be great with this. Maybe a little bit less thick and more like a pudding in a dish with some toasted coconut. That kind of follows the theme. So if you stick with themes, it can help you out a lot from the beverage all the way through to the finished dessert. That's a really good question.
And Natalie asked, will any curry do as well without being cooked?
Does curry do well without being cooked?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this particular blend, I sprinkle it on my rice. And like I said, because this has like dehydrated onions in it. So that's what, to me, it really helps this stand apart from most of your curry spices. And you could do that yourself at home. Just get the dehydrated onion and add curry, mix them together. You've got your own blend. So yeah, you do not need to cook it. It can be done fresh on top. Even though with the earlier question about someone's husband not liking curry and them liking it, maybe they create a salt shaker with curry powder and a little bit of salt, and that's what they use. So absolutely, you can add it to that. You can even use. Yeah,
It's Jackie. I just wonder, I think maybe people are wondering about curry paste versus a dried curry powder.
Oh, curry pastes. You could do this with the curry paste, absolutely. The thing that you would do is just dissolve that in the water, right? So you have the water that's in the part of the recipe. You just need to thin it out. The curry pastes are like pastes, right? So they're very thick. and you have to adjust that consistency to a point where it will coat the vegetables and the proteins. You may
And
not
then
need,
just
yeah,
to follow up on that real quickly, does it caramelize if there's moisture in there like that?
it does. There's
Okay.
not that much moisture, so that moisture evaporates in the first few minutes. You don't want to get carried away. You shouldn't have, you'll see there was no pool of water or anything there. It dissolves and coats the vegetables. Most of it gets absorbed into like florets of broccoli. You can see that there's moisture in there, like the ones you get at the supermarket that have been sprayed. That will evaporate very quickly. And then you're left with the glaze of that curry paste or the sriracha in this case. And then it cooks and that will start to caramelize as well. So yeah, those are really good questions.
Thank you.
Yep.
Somebody asked if we could make halpia from scratch one day, and somebody else agreed with that question. Halpia.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's super simple. That's a really, really easy one. We didn't do a dessert when we did our luau class. We just did the main dishes. But yeah, we can make anything. I'll figure it out. I used to do loads of halpia. So if Jack,
How about coconut tapioca?
tells me to do.
Okay. Good, good. We're getting a lot of comments about how great the dish looks. Thank you. I think.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. And like I said, it's healthy. We used almost no fat. You could do this, like I said, with no fat. Choose the one that you want, that's your favorite, and then serve it fresh. But keep in mind also that if you're doing the dish like this and taking the time to do all the cutting, if you have leftovers, this is perfectly fine cold. It doesn't even have to be hot. So this with pasta, honestly, even some mayo, imagine that as a pasta salad. I would generally make it a little bit smaller cuts, but that would be great. This roasted vegetable and the chicken and all of that cooled and then folded in with a little bit of tofu mayonnaise or a low-fat mayonnaise to make it like a pasta salad with elbow macaroni would be delicious. So lots of different avenues to go with this. Add a little bit of water and some of that super spicy Thai curry paste, and you can make a soup. You have everything you need here to make a soup. So, just think about the components and practice and stay healthy. And I appreciate the questions and appreciate you guys tuning in.
And thank you, Chef Dan. And thanks everybody for joining us again this evening. And we hope to see you next week when we'll be featuring satay, kebab, and yakitori.
That's right.
Thanks, Chef Dan.